The Paso del Norte Texas Civil Rights Project is the only rights litigation organization in its region with a full-time staff, including attorneys Brian Jacobi and Portia Brown.
Why should people in El Paso vote? Because your vote matters significantly. I mean, El Paso represents a portion of the U.S. population very strongly that does not vote in the numbers that they should be voting.
Attorney Portia Brown stated that the current challenges to voting in Texas are similar to voting challenges experienced in southern U.S. states as a collective.
And what do you think students done both?
Chances are, well, from speaking to people, some people tend not to vote because of laziness. Some people have the same views as me, which is that, I mean, it doesn't make that big of a difference because they're all terrible candidates. Some people just don't want to, don't agree with it.
Well, voting is one of the most basic, fundamental human rights people have, and I think that people in America tend to take it for granted. I can assure you there's people in other countries fighting for the right to vote and dying for the right to vote, so it's extremely important. But on a different level, it's when you vote, you're essentially casting your voice into the public discourse. We tend to think of it as voting for candidates, but in many ways you're voting for ideas, and you're voting for changes to laws and rules of how society works and what rights and freedoms we're going to have. So to have your say in that is extremely important.
Do you like to vote?
I love voting. I think it's very important.
Why do you think it is so important to vote?
I think it's important for everyone to exercise their right to be able to vote. También es una cosa que puedes hacer en el process del democracy y para el government, para cambiar todo lo que pasa en el gobierno. Si tienes un problema, si puedes votar y puede cambiar todo.
¿Por qué piensa que la gente hoy en día, los jóvenes, no votan, no les gusta votar?
Yo creo porque no piensan la importancia de votar o que no saben lo que tienen que hacer ahorita o piensan que no cuenta, que su voto no cuenta.
What are the obstacles that do you have that you think that people have for voting?
I think one of the biggest obstacles right now is knowledge and education, and I also think some of the processes with like ID laws and stuff are really turning people away.
So that's even though you're eligible to vote under law, and maybe you're even registered to vote, then you have to think of the right IDs to go to the polling station to actually cast your vote. So there's actually 3 different layers to actually moving forward, and
3 different hoops to jump through to get
3
there?
different hoops to jump through to finally get through and have your vote heard.
Why do you think Texas has such a low voting turnout?
I think there's a lot of answers to that question. There's a lot of factors. For one, there's just historical factors. As everybody knows, we had Jim Crow laws, we had slaves in our history, we had efforts to keep minorities, especially members of the black community in Texas, from being educated. We've been trying in the state for hundreds of years to disenfranchise people.
Okay, so the voting rights timeline, this is very brief, it's nothing exhaustive. It basically starts in 1870 with the 15th Amendment passing, which allowed for African American males to get their rights to vote. That only included men, because women weren't there at that point yet. What this did was help to get African Americans to vote, but it also still involved polling taxes and literacy tests, and some other discriminatory methods were still used in voting for African American males. Moving forward, in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed by Lyndon B. Johnson. He signed that, and that was to help eliminate the voting barriers that existed at the state and local level for African Americans after the 15th Amendment. In 1975, that Voting Rights Act was amended to help out with minority languages. What that meant was that if a significant amount or a little more than 5% of the population spoke no English, then they had to provide voting materials in that language.
Una pregunta para usted. ¿Usted vota aquí en los Estados Unidos?
Sí.
¿Por qué vota?
Por necesidad. Todos nos somos afectados después de la selección, especialmente de la presidencia que está ahorita en grande. Entonces, estamos afectados ya sea aquí dentro del estado, dentro de los Estados Unidos. Entonces, es muy importante que siempre tenga uno que decir y no quedar callado.
The organization provides pro bono services to residents of West Texas and southern New Mexico, including legal representation for victims of civil rights violations in state and federal courts, legal and social services for victims of domestic violence, and an extensive economic justice program focusing on employer wage theft, underpayment of wages, and unsafe working conditions.